from online. And with that, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Prime Minister Imran Khan.
Thank you very much, Nancy. The United States Institute of Peace, listening to my view about Pakistan's policy, and I start with how someone like me, a sportsman for 20 years, international sportsman who ended up in politics. I'm the first generation Pakistani. My parents were born in colonial India. I was the first generation who grew up in an independent Pakistan. We grew up with a lot of pride. My parents reminded me always how awful it was to live in a colonial, in a country where you didn't have your freedom. So I valued the freedom of being in an independent country. And we took great pride when Pakistan started growing rapidly in the 60s. It's not used to my voice, I think it's too heavy for me. In the 60s, Pakistan was the fastest growing country in the whole region. Pakistan was a country which gave us hope. We grew up feeling that this is a country with a destiny. And then things started going wrong from 70s onwards. And I was playing cricket for 2 decades, international sportsman. I finished in the early 90s. And my initial thought after playing sport was to go into social work. I had already started building a cancer hospital. My mother had died of cancer. And I realized that there was no cancer hospital in Pakistan, so I thought I would build one, specifically because poor people cannot afford cancer treatment. So I spent 6-7 years of my life after cricket building and then running the hospital. But it was during that time I realized that this is a big country. Social work was not going to change it. The only way it would change our country is joining politics. Change only comes through when you head a government and bring about a change. And the reason why I joined politics was because I realized our politics was going in a direction which was leading Pakistan to nowhere. Problem with most ex-colonial countries was exactly what Pakistan was facing. If you look at Africa, you look at the independence movements in Africa, and then the leaders who came from the independence movement, once they assumed government, a similar pattern took place. The moment they got power, they used power for benefiting themselves. Corruption was the main reason why countries could not reach their potential. And Pakistan was exactly that country which in 60s, while was taking off, from mid-80s onwards, it started going down because of corruption of the ruling elite. So when I formed my party in 1996, it was on an anti-corruption platform. And I campaigned for 15 years in the political wilderness, talking about corruption, and could not make people understand the relevance, the relation between corruption and poverty. People could not relate the two. Somehow in ex-colonial countries, people thought taking money from the government was nothing wrong with it, because it was not your government. It was a foreign government which was ruling over you. So if you evaded taxes, there was, you were not doing anything wrong. And similarly, corruption. So I formed my party, as I said, in 1996. For 15 years, I had only a few people with me, and no one thought I had a chance. But then suddenly, people began to understand what I was saying. So the party then began to take off about 7 years ago. And in 2013, we formed government in one of the 4 provinces. And because of our performance in that one performance, in that one province, in 2018, we won the elections. So what has been the main challenge since we've come to power 10 months ago? Number one challenge was inheriting a country which was bankrupt. We had the biggest current account and fiscal deficits. But worse, what corruption does is it's not just a question of bankrupting a country and money being laundered out of the country. What happens is the ruling elites, when they make money, when they make money out of corruption, they then have to take it out of the country, because otherwise people would ask them questions, where did the money come from? So you suffer in 2 ways. Number one, money which should go to human development ends up going into people's pockets. But secondly, that money leaves the country. And in my opinion, which I spoke to President Trump yesterday, the biggest problem that the world faces is about $1 trillion leaving developing and poor countries and either going into offshore accounts, or they end up in Western countries. And this is impoverishing, this is causing more deaths than through terrorism, than through drugs. The amount of people dying of hunger and disease, lack of education, not having clean drinking water, is because of the ruling elites and developing world taking that money out and parking it into, as I said, offshore accounts or Western countries. So we faced a similar situation. We had the biggest current account deficit and fiscal deficit. But the other aspect of corruption is that in order for the ruling elites to take money out, they have to destroy the state institutions. Because if the institutions are strong, they would not be able to take the money out. For instance, if your anti-corruption body is strong, if your justice system is working, is robust, if your taxation department, like equivalent to the Indian revenue here or the IRS here, if these institutions are strong, you cannot take money out of the country. But that's the biggest damage these corrupt ruling elites do to developing world. They destroy these institutions. So, you can recover the money, but what you can't, to build institutions takes time. So the biggest challenge we have faced since we've been in power is trying to build the state institutions. And, we have succeeded, we have turned around various institutions, but it is a slow process. The relationship which we had with our neighbors, the other priority we have tried to instill in Pakistan amongst the people is that we must have good relationship with all our neighbors. Because Pakistan at the moment, most of all, needs stability. We need stability for economic progress. We need peace. And so for peace, we need to have a good relationship with our neighbors. So first was me trying to reach out to India. India is, a country which we've had turbulent relationship with. But unfortunately, because of one issue of Kashmir, whenever we have tried, whenever relationship has started to move in the right direction with India, some incident happens, and that's all related to Kashmir, we go back to square one. And so I reached out to my counterpart in India, the Indian Prime Minister, assured him that, you come one step towards us, we will go two steps towards you, because the biggest problem India and Pakistan face is poverty. And the best way we can reduce poverty is if we start trading with each other. The next was Afghanistan. We again have had a difficult relationship with Afghanistan. And so we have reached out. I have invited President Ghani to Pakistan. And, it's a sort of long story, but we are moving towards, fortunately, we are all moving towards the same direction. There's a convergence now in Pakistan, in the US, that there is no military solution in Afghanistan. So we are all working towards the peace process. Similarly with Iran, we've had sort of a decent relationship with Iran without, it's not really a warm relationship, but a decent relationship with them. So we reached out to all our neighbors. And the next is the US. US is a superpower. You have to have good relationship with the US, whether you like it or not. So I was a bit worried when I was invited to meet President Trump. I've been in limelight, public life for 40 years. And sort of when I've gone to meet people who are famous or well-known or in power, you normally get advice that, what you should do, what questions you should ask when you meet them. But never in my life have I had so many suggestions before I was going to meet President Trump. Inundated. And I have to say that it was one of the most pleasant surprises, not just for me, for my delegation. The way, the hospitality, the way he, straightforward, charming way he treated us, so we were all blown over. We loved the meeting with the president yesterday. But above all, we decided on how we will now have a close relationship between Pakistan and the US. How we will now ensure that there is no communication gap. The period from 2003 or 4 to 2015 was the worst in the relationship between Pakistan and the US. Pakistanis felt that they were fighting the US war. It was, no Pakistani was involved in 9/11. Taliban were in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda was in Afghanistan, but Pakistan ended up involved in that war, and we lost 70,000 people. We lost over $100 billion lost to our economy. And yet, there was mistrust. Pakistan felt it was doing its best. It could have stayed out of the war, and yet Pakistan participated in the war, and Pakistan took a battering. There was a point when people like us thought, are we going to survive? Because there were suicide bombs going on every day. There were no sports team used to visit Pakistan, forget about investors. And so we passed through a terrible period, but at the same time, the US thought we weren't doing enough. We were playing a double game. So that was, in my opinion, the worst. It was the worst phase between the relationship between US and Pakistan. I was one of those, and I came here, I think in 2009, and I tried to explain to people here that there was no military solution in Afghanistan. I met, then Democrats hadn't come into power, the elections hadn't happened just before President Obama won the elections. I tried to explain I had a meeting organized, there's Dr. Ikram here, he